date is the 21st of May 2019. The location is Middle Temple Hall, central London. What was about to happen next was one of the most important speeches in modern times. The retired Supreme Court Justice Lord Jonathan Sumption delivered a phenomenal tour de force in the first of his BBC Reith Lectures. In this video, I want to explain how and why this lecture was so important and the startling relevance it came to have barely 1 year later. Just to explain, the Reith Lectures are a series of annual radio lectures given by leading figures of the day, commissioned by the BBC and broadcast on BBC Radio 4 and the BBC World Service. Who is Lord Sumption, I hear you say? Well, he's a retired judge with a formidable reputation for intellectual excellence and a truly forensic understanding of history. He has presided over some of the UK's most important legal cases in recent times. In the 2019 Reith Lecture, Lord Sumption discusses two themes, namely the decline of politics and the rise of law to fill the void. He starts the lecture by explaining that up until the 19th century, laws did not interfere in the lives of citizens to the degree to which it does now. In his words, law penetrates every corner of human life. In an amazing statistic, he tells how the modern edition of English statutes is 50 volumes thick, with another 30 volumes of supplements. On top of this, there are 21,000 regulations made under statutory powers and nearly 12,000 regulations made by the European Union. Take 2010, for example. A phenomenal 700 new criminal offences were created, and that rate does not seem to be decreasing by any measure at all. Jonathan Sumption then continues with further examples of how in the last 100 years the law has encroached more and more into every aspect of our lives. It's something that I've never really given much thought about, but once I heard the lecture, the expanding domain of law suddenly becomes a frightening prospect. So how did we get to the point where law has dominated every aspect of our lives? Again, we have to look at the past for the answer. As democracy became established within the UK, the demands of the public led to greater involvement of the state within our everyday affairs. As Sumption puts it so beautifully, law is the prime instrument of collective action, and rising expectations of the state naturally leads to calls for legal solutions. He then explores another two themes that are responsible for the increasing rate of legislation within the country. The first one is a growing moral and social absolutism, which looks to law to produce conformity. The other is the constant quest for greater security and to reduce the risk in our daily lives. The rise of social media has led to this increased tendency for the law to impose conformity within society. Social media and the newspapers can have the unfortunate effect of suppressing opinions which differ from that which the law favours. Censorship and shaming are employed to castigate those who dare to have an alternative view. Lord Sumption argues that because law is creeping into every facet of our daily lives, our autonomy as individuals to make life choices is being continually eroded. Now, moving on to the public desire for greater security and risk reduction, there seems to be a greater societal tendency for sacrifices to be made in return for protection from perceived threats. The main problem with this, however, is that risk is not an absolute value, but in reality, risk is a relative value that can never be completely eliminated from society. This is a key part of the lecture, in my opinion. Society today has become far too risk-averse, with disastrous consequences, all in the name of satisfying the public's desire for safety. So this is where I want to discuss the conclusions that Sumption makes in his lecture. The conclusion of this lecture is quite clear. That is, despite the law expanding to provide greater security to citizens, this has come at a huge cost. What is this cost? It is the loss of autonomy, where risk is deemed to be an intolerable fact of life. In the past, risk was deemed to be an acceptable part of everyday life. These days, after a major legal incident, there is huge societal clamour for legislation to be expanded so as to prevent future incidents from happening. Expectations from society have a huge influence upon the development of new laws. The growing need for risk reduction is in danger of creating a culture where risk elimination rather than risk mitigation is the end goal. So where does this leave us? Well, we're heading towards a society where we just can't seem to have fun anymore, or we can't be responsible for our own risk management because the state is intervening so much and telling us, I suppose, what we can and can't do. The lecture ends with a stark warning from Sumption. The warning is that as the domain of law expands, the power of the state to enforce these laws must also expand in unison to match. Everything that we were warned about back in 2019 through this lecture came to life when the pandemic struck. A huge number of laws were drafted to deal with the virus, and the expansion of the state within our own personal lives reached a critical level. So the question is, do we carry on accepting a greater role of the state in our lives in return for perceived reductions in risk? Are we happy to lose more and more of our freedoms as the power of the law is ever expanded? These are important questions, and the answers will shape our future for decades to come. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm looking forward to the next project already. Hopefully I'll see you around soon. Take care everyone, and thanks for watching. Goodbye for now.